System hacking. In this nugget, we address system hacking. We start off by taking a look at what privilege escalation is. And this is going to be important as a hacker, especially when we get down to later things in our hacks, such as using Metasploit, because it doesn't do much good to exploit a system if you cannot also escalate your privilege and do something administrative. Also, we'll take a look here at alternate data streams, which is a great way of hiding some data inside of another file. We'll take a look at spyware as well. This is, of course, where people try to gain access to your passwords or install keyloggers or something like that, which is one of the most nefarious forms of spyware. We also look at steganography. This is very similar to the alternate data streams that I talked about up there. This is where you can bury a file or some kind of text or information inside of another file. It could be an MP3 music file or a JPEG file or something like this. And then the mother of all exploits comes out with Metasploit. This is a huge database of exploits that you can take advantage of and actually perform real hacks. I gotta tell you, this particular nugget that I'm about to teach reminds me of when I was young and before I was married. I worked for a nonprofit organization that traveled a lot from city to city, and we would stay in the home of volunteers that supported the nonprofit organization so that we didn't have to pay for hotels and things, and they would even loan us their cars. Well, one man loaned us a car, me and my roommate, who I traveled with at the time, and he said, now, when you fill it up with gas, don't fill it up all the way, only about maybe a quarter of a tank. Okay, and when you go around corners, go real slow, and when you take off from a stop sign, accelerate very, very slowly. I thought, well, okay, I'll try to honor that and remember. Well, a couple of times I've forgotten, and as I was taking off from a stop sign one day, I heard a lot of sloshing and splashing, and I couldn't figure out what that was, and I thought, well, it's the gas tank, I guess, and I looked behind me, and I realized why he had been telling us to be so careful with this car. You see, the top half of the gas tank had rusted out, and when you accelerate, gas was pouring out of the back of it, and I could look in the rear view mirror and see gas all over the pavement, and I thought to myself, oh dear heavens, if this car backfires or someone throws a cigarette butt out of their window, we're toast, literally. Well, it's kind of like that with some people's networks as well. They have open vulnerabilities that they did not even realize were there, and we're going to show you how to exploit some of those things and throw a match on the gasoline here. It's going to be a lot of fun, folks. Anyway, oh, the memories that I have. Oh, boy. All right, let's talk here about privilege escalation. Now, this is where you're going to take a specific level of permission to do something, and you can escalate it to a higher level. Now, I'm going to address at least in theory here, but honestly, a lot of it's going to actually be practically implemented in the future as we take a look at some other hacks. But what we do with this is we normally will exploit some kind of an operating system or software vulnerability. And I kind of honestly feel sorry for folks that develop operating systems, even really good ones like some of the Linux operating systems and Windows and some of the software packages out there as well. It's a huge undertaking to develop this stuff, and some of the development teams have dozens, if not over 100 developers working on the thing. It's really difficult for the right hand to know what the left hand is doing sometime. And as a result, just because of human error or something gets overlooked or whatever, there will be vulnerabilities. We've seen some recent ones, for example, like the Adobe PDF problems. I just got the Metasploit utility that's called Armitage. I'll show you that here in a little while. And you can even create malicious PDF files and then send it to somebody in something like a phishing email saying, here's your new invoice for the mortgage payment or whatever it is, or make it look like it's something official, and when they double click to open the PDF, it can unleash a payload on their systems that they might not even be aware of. And you know, this is really a difficult one, or one that could cause a lot of problems for people, because normally folks think of PDFs as simple documents that are normally read-only anyway, and they don't usually think of them as having programmatic capability. But they actually do, and so that's where the danger is. There's also countless Windows vulnerabilities, and these are addressed weekly through some kind of a patch fix, security update, all those sorts of things. Sometimes there are dozens of fixes in a given week. So, you know, Microsoft is constantly chasing these down and trying to stomp out the problems there. There's also just a matter of poor programming. This could be some simple utility or maybe some freeware, or it might even be a legit program like some of the Adobe products out there that just have some programming problems where they may allow for overflow in the data buffers. You see, there's no distinction between data and executable code. So if this represents, a certain portion of memory, and it's supposed to have, data in it. I'll just put a big D here for data. Well, there's certain things you can do to exploit this with shellcode where you can overflow this memory area. So you can shove up into this some kind of a shellcode. I'll put SC for shellcode, and it will, squirt into here, so to speak, and it'll shoot out at the top of this something that is no longer necessary or no longer going to be used or not, or something that might not be missed by the user or by the operating system. Okay, this might even be a portion of memory that doesn't have anything in it. It was just originally reserved for data. It just didn't get filled up. Sometimes when you do this, it can shoot out of the top of this something that is important to the operating system, and then you might have a blue screen, a crash, a system hang, that sort of thing go on as well. But fortunately, there's a lot of these hacks that work really well where you can shoot some shellcode into this memory area, and this is called very often a stack overflow or something like this. This is a memory stack. And it'll continue to operate just very nicely, and you can successfully exploit an operating system using something like this. Now, one of the ways that we can hack systems is to use something called alternate data streams. This is actually something that we'll normally do after we've hacked a system or compromised it. You see, sometimes there's such target-rich environments. There's so many exploitable systems in so little time. So you may just have to come back to a system later on. And you just don't have time for it right now. But while you're gone, you might want to hide some files there that you can use later on. Okay, so that's one of the big advantages of alternate data streams, also known as just simply ADS. It's important to hide the files. There could be a simple text file that gives you reminder steps that show you how you hacked that system originally, or some exploits with multiple steps involved that you might want to review before you try to do anything else to that machine again, or some warnings to yourself, some things that might make that system crash that you want to be aware of so you don't repeat any errors. It could also be a rootkit that you want to hide on the machine, and you want to unleash that rootkit at a later point in time. Or it could be a script that you want to release at a later point in time. So any other kind of an executable, whatever file you want, really, you can just hide that file in an alternate data stream. Okay, normally this is because of an NTFS feature, so to speak, that makes the NTFS file system compatible with older Apple operating systems. But the big idea with ADS is that you can just stuff a file away somewhere and make it actually invisible to anybody else that could see the operating system. And unless they happen to know that it was there and how to get it out, there's no way that somebody would actually know that file was there. Here, let me show you how it works. Alright, so let's get this thing to work, huh? Let's go to a command prompt here, and I'm going to go to change the directory to the root. And let's see, we don't have any special directories. I'll just create one called temp. How about that? Make a directory. How about that? Called temp. Alright, and then I'll change to that directory. And we see there's nothing in there. Alright, I'm going to do Notepad just to create something. Notepad, and I'll call this myfile.txt. And it's not there. I'm going to go ahead and create it. I don't even have to put any text in here. I'm just going to go ahead and save this and then exit. Okay, so we'll get out of it. The next thing I need to do is to identify the file that I want to stuff in here. For example, I'm just going to put calculator in there. It's an executable, obviously, but it could have easily also been some kind of a rootkit or any other malicious executable. So let's just take a look at calculator. So I'll do a dir c:\windows system32 calc.exe, and you'll notice that it's about 115K in size, right? And how big is my file in the temp directory? 0 bytes. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. What I want to do is to stuff calculator using alternate data streams into myfile.txt and then make it invisible. So I'm going to go do this. I'll type, let's do this. I'll type, actually use the command type, and then my executable, c:\windows system32 calc.exe, and I'm going to use a greater than sign to send that to my file .txt : okay, so just pause the screen for a moment if you want to look at that, but you just use the type command, and you're going to send whatever the executable is, wherever it's located, using a greater than sign into your kind of fake file or whatever it is. This could even be a legit file, a useful file. It just doesn't matter. I'm just going to send it to that file, and then and then the name of the executable that I'm hiding, calc.exe, and press enter. Now if I do a dir again, look, we still have 0 bytes. Doesn't look like calculator is in there anywhere. However, if I run the start command now, look at what happens. So then, let's go ahead and start. We'll use the start command, so start. And then you have to type in the full path. Notice that I'm in the temp directory, but there's a weird thing about this. You actually have to type the path even if you're in there. I don't really know why, but you do. So it's going to be /temp /, and then the name of the file, which is my file.txt, and then colon, and then calc.exe. Okay, so I think I typed that all right. Okay, then I'll press enter, and voila, there's my rootkit. There's my virus. There's whatever it is that I want to open up, and this could be, again, any executable I want it to be, or a set of instructions, or something, a script, whatever. Okay, so you can see that this kind of thing could be quite dangerous. Now, there are some antivirus products out there that would be able to detect this kind of a malicious payload in an alternate data stream. But if I'm just hiding hacking instructions or passwords or something like that inside of that file, your antivirus is not going to pick that up. So the only way it's going to be able to see that is if it has any kind of a malicious or destructive payload in it. Also, here we're in Windows Server 2003. If you're in, let's see, Windows Vista or later, you can kind of see some of those things. You can see these files in a stream by doing a dir/r. And of course, it's invalid here. But if I did it in a more recent operating system, that would show up. Now, again, you don't just do this on every directory. You would only do this if you were suspicious that there was something hidden in there and you wanted to confirm that. But it's really even worse than a needle in a haystack because you don't even know which haystack to look in. So it's a very good way of hiding these files. All right, next up, spyware. Now, I don't think spyware is anything new to any of us. We're probably pretty well familiar with it. It's really closely associated with spam and or phishing, usually more like phishing. And when I say phishing, that's the phishing. This is where they will send you something in an email, and it's intended to have you click on it or open an attachment or whatever. And what it's intended to do is to provide surreptitious access to private and or sensitive data. And I just like using the word surreptitious. I'm not quite sure why. But anyway, they want to access your information without you knowing it is what that basically is saying. This is going to often be spread through a couple of different ways, as I mentioned earlier. Malicious websites. So it could simply be a phishing email with a link in it to a malicious website, or it might be a website that's designed to lure you there, or that's a misspelling. So for example, normally you might go to, I don't know, cbtnuggets.com, but if you went to some misspelling of cbtnuggets.com, someone might have put in there, then it would take you off to a malicious website. And some of these sites are pretty clever, actually. And just by visiting the website, it may open a frame that is malicious, and you didn't even have to click on anything on the page, and it could still infect you with some kind of spyware. There's also the phishing, which I guess I already mentioned that up there. But that, again, is, of course, where you get an email that solicits you to click on something, or sometimes even just opening the phishing email may also be a problem, because there can be frames in that as well, especially if they're HTML. An additional threat, it's not really a threat, but an additional kind of an annoyance with that is that some phishing emails will also have a bug in them. And what's a bug? Well, it's also known as a web beacon, but it might just be a 1-pixel transparent dot, graphic. It's just like, it's 1 pixel right there. And you can't even see it with the human eye, but what it's designed to do is it has a backlink to another website or some other kind of a log where that they can identify by that dot that you were actually opening that email, and they'll know that you saw it, or at the very least. Often these spyware things are from organized crime these days. It's not just some 14-year-old in their basement trying to come up with some kind of a prank anymore. This is where there's crime syndicates that have this as an entire line of business. And they're very often well-funded, sophisticated, and pretty tough. So you got to keep that in mind as well. They will not have any mercy if they can get a hold of your bank accounts and so on. The prevention of this is actually pretty simple. Again, probably something you're already pretty familiar with. Use antivirus software, some kind of a security suite, which includes usually antivirus, anti-spyware. It probably also has some kind of firewall. Symantec, for example, I use in one of my offices a Symantec product that has kind of all-in-one packaging. McAfee, Panda, all the rest of them have similar kinds of security suites. It's probably a good idea. And then also make sure that you get regular updates that can be configured either on the client side, and they can specify what time of day or night to get the update, Some of them only update once a week by default. I recommend updates every day at least. It doesn't really hurt anything to go out there and check for an update unless you're paying for your bandwidth by the kilobyte or something, and that doesn't happen very often anymore. Also, in the corporation, there's often a antivirus server that will download the updates for you, and then they can even push them out to the clients on a scheduled basis. Also, this is the big part of this, the weakest link as well, by the way, user education. You can do all kinds of things. You can have the best security suite, get the best updates and all this kind of stuff, but if a user just ignorantly clicks on a link that they shouldn't click on, they might unleash some kind of a new, Melissa virus or a worm or something like that throughout your network, or in this case, I guess, spyware, where it can do things such as install keyloggers, which we'll talk about next. So a keylogger is probably the most nefarious form of some kind of spyware. What it does is it captures every keystroke that you type, and that has obvious dangers. I mean, they'll know your passwords, they'll know your login credentials, they'll know confidential emails or documents that you're typing. There's really not much that's kept from the keylogger software. It can actually be software or hardware, but let's start with the software. Number one, here's a good thing about the software keyloggers. They are detectable. At the time of this recording, there was another military security compromise in which the drones that are being flown over the Middle East, they're controlled from a central location apparently. And I only know about this from what I'm getting in the news reports on Fox News and stuff like that. But there was actually a keylogger that made its way into their systems, and so that they were able to, the malicious parties were able to see everything that was going on in those control systems. It's a very dangerous kind of thing going on. Well, fortunately, they were able to detect it. And the reason for that is because a lot of antivirus software looks for these keyloggers. The thing that's a danger with the keyloggers is it's only as good as how updated the antivirus software is. There's a lot of hackers out there that are capable of creating their own keylogger software that there's no signature for. And so if they can get it installed, well, then you have a problem. And what they'll often do in the software versions of these is they will collect, whatever, an hour, a day, a week's worth of keystrokes, and then they can send that keystroke log to an anonymous email account of some type, and then they have all of your data. And then from our side of things as hackers, obviously we don't want this kind of software on our own computers, but we want to install it on other people's if possible. But the fact that it's so easily detectable can be a problem. That's where hardware keyloggers are really much better. They're difficult, really, if not impossible, to detect. No antivirus software or intrusion detection software or anything like that will be able to detect a hardware keylogger. They have a very low profile. Really, the only way to identify it is to go to the back of the computer, visually inspect it, and see it sitting there. Okay. They have to be physically installed, though, and that's one of the drawbacks as a hacker and a penetration tester. If you don't have physical access to the computer you want to put a keylogger on, you're not going to be able to get there. But they do have to be physically installed, and then a lot of the keyloggers will store the keylog in flash memory on that keylogger, and then you have to go back later and physically remove it. Now, some of these now actually have Wi-Fi access, though, so that's kind of cool. Let me show you this one. I just found this. I've never used their product before, but it's kind of ingenious at keylog.com. I think they're from the UK, judging on the prices I'm seeing here. Anyway, what we have going on here is you can plug this into an open USB port, maybe at the back of the user's computer, and it uses a Wi-Fi signal to send out the keylog. Okay, this is done through an email address. It sends the data as emails. And the advantage of this is you never have to return to pick it up. They have a couple other products I kind of like. This one right here, this is similar to a keylogger. This is where it'll take screen captures of what you're seeing on the screen. So that's kind of a handy item. And then there's this one here as well. This is very similar to the first one that we saw. It's just that apparently it's just smaller, and it also has a back to it here so that you not only plug it in, but you can also continue the connection on the other side of it. And that's just kind of the conventional way that keyloggers go, because you'll plug the keyboard in there. And then there's this one here, a key grabber. This one doesn't have the Wi-Fi, so you would have to return to grab this one. And then there's the PS2 edition, which you don't really see that much anymore because most people have USB keyboards now. But if you still have one of the old ones, you can use those as well. Now, steganography is quite fascinating to me, and I'm very interested in it. What this does is it allows you to conceal data inside of another file, such as another multimedia file like an MP3 file, or most commonly JPEGs or bitmaps, but you can also do it with PNG graphics files. This is kind of where you'll have this scenario that you have a specific employee and you check their email logs, and they seem to be sending harmless photographs to somebody else outside of your organization. And they may even be boring photographs, or photographs of their vacation, or of their cat, or something like this. But what you don't realize, at the time at least, is that it actually has contained in it secret and possibly encrypted data. It could have your customer list in there. It could have passwords for people in there. It could have any kinds of sensitive data hidden inside of those graphics files. And these are very difficult in many cases to detect. If you do a search for Google, you'll find several free products out there. I'm going to show you a couple of them that seem to work pretty well. And these are useful, of course, for, again, there's the word, surreptitious data sharing. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at how this might work. All right, so by way of example, here's a product called Image Hide 2004, and it's you can get this from dancemammal.com. I don't know where they came up with that name. My wife and I took dancing lessons this past summer, and my dance instructor kept calling me that, herself. She kept calling me a dance mammal. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's because I dance like I have hooves, apparently. Anyway, as we take a look at this, you can see that where you first load an image, which I've already done, and then you can write data. So you just type in what you want. I put in here, my boss Greg wears Spanx. Some secret message. And then you just write the data into the file, and it'll tell you if it wrote it down here, okay. And then what you can do is later on you just save the image file when you're ready to save it, and then you would send it out in an email or something like this. You can also encrypt that data, and so I would click there and I would click encrypt, and I would say this doesn't mask this password, so I might say doorway as the password. I don't know, something like that. All right, now it's encrypted text, and I can close this. All right, if I want to later on when I open this file up and decrypt it, then I would have to enter in that same password. Okay, so anyway, I'll go ahead and save this image, and I'll just send this out somewhere. And over on my other screen there, I saved it as a PNG just to my desktop. So let's go ahead and take a look at the file. Okay, I'm double-clicking on the file on my desktop, and here it pops open, and you can kind of get a little better look at the picture there. Okay, so this was actually when I was lost in Montana. I was on a road. I don't even know where I was, and my GPS didn't know where I was either. And so I just leaned out the car window and took this photograph while it was snowing. Anyway, it looks just like a harmless photograph, doesn't it? But somewhere in here is the message, my boss Greg wears Spanx, and it's encrypted. By the way, I don't actually have a boss named Greg, but anyway, that's just a FYI. So it looks and acts just like a normal graphics file until I want to go ahead and use it and see the message that's in it. So, of course, whoever I'm sending this to would have to know that I've embedded the message. We talk over the phone or whatever, and then I have them use that same software to decrypt the message. All right, so the person that's on the other end of this, who I'm sending this graphics file to, that I want them to get the secret message from, they open it up from their email or whatever, they save it to their desktop, so they are now going to load an image, and they'll just load this image from their desktop, and you can see it's now been loaded. Now what I want to do is to read the data, and it says here, my boss Greg wears Spanx. And in this case, since I'm opening it on the same machine I originally encrypted it on, I don't have to decrypt it. But you can see there that there's the message. That's just one way of working with this. There's a couple of other products out there that are pretty good. They work in a different way, though. And let me show you one of those here. That one's called OpenStego. Now, the way OpenStego works is that we simply specify an algorithm. There's a couple of different, options that you have there. And then we look for a message file, first of all. Now, let me actually show you the message file. And this would be the file that has the secrets that I'm trying to transport. And I've just created a notepad file here called mysecrets.txt. And you can kind of pause the recording if you want and read through all of my secrets. By the way, if you look through these, I'm not going to say any of these are true, but one of these might be true of me. Okay, you'll have to guess which one I've actually done. Anyway, so these are the secrets that I'm trying to smuggle out of the office. And again, this could be a customer list. This could be anything. I could email myself some kind of confidential data in what looks like a harmless photograph. Looks like this, in fact. Okay, this is just another arch in Arches National Park. It's called Whale Arch. So anyway, we can just take this JPEG file. I can embed that text file that I showed you just a moment ago and email the photograph to myself, and it looks quite innocent when indeed it's really not. So now I'm going to find the secrets. That's the message file itself. And the cover file here is the image file that we're working with, and that's this one. I just called it Max Preps. I don't know why. Anyway, then the output stego file, would be the name of the PNG. It actually converts it from a JPEG, in this case, to a PNG, and I'll just call this whalearch.png. And then we'll just go to, I guess I'll click OK here. Let it do its thing. I've already got a PNG there. I'm just going to overwrite the existing one, and that's good. So now that that's been done, I can extract it. But before I do that, let me just double-click on the PNG file. Okay, there it is. This has my secrets.txt file in it. There's no way to tell by looking at this. And the way it does this, by the way, is it takes advantage of portions of JPEG or PNG files that are not actually used to display the image. So there's no way to tell, just by the naked eye at least, that there is any message in this, even though there is a text file in there, as we know. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and open this up. I'm going to actually put this on the desktop because I don't want it to overwrite the existing file that I originally used. So I'm going to use my desktop there and then click OK. And then I guess I also have a secrets file there. Okay, so I'll overwrite that and open it. Okay, so now it's written it over there, and it's okay. So then all I have to do is I've now got that written to my desktop, and I double click on it. There it is. This was extracted out of that PNG file. All right, so we've done our reconnaissance. We've done our scanning. We've hopefully stayed stealthy and haven't been caught, at least not yet. So once we collect all of this information, what do we actually do? Well, you want to exploit that system ultimately, don't you? Probably to gain root, or in a Windows environment you want to gain administrative access or even system access. How's that going to take place? Well, very often you're going to use Metasploit. Now, you don't have to use Metasploit. You could write your own shell code and kind of recreate the wheel and come up with your own whole method programmatically of being able to exploit that remote machine. But the main thinking here is, why would you do that? Because Metasploit has shell code already written for you. In fact, I don't really know how to write shell code. I can look at it and identify the various parts of it and kind of understand how it was put together. But to create it from scratch, I really don't know how to do that. And I don't really want to learn because I, after all, have Metasploit, where this open source product has been contributed to by many other people who have already come up with shell code that I can just use. It's kind of the same with PowerShell scripts and Perl scripts, Ruby, all of those kinds of scripts. Just use something that's already been created and don't recreate the wheel as much as you can. Anyway, Metasploit's a gigantic database of various vulnerabilities, not just against Windows products, even also various database items, Oracle, also Linux, Mac OS, all these different things are included in the Metasploit database, and you just find out which target it is that you want to attack and find out which exploits they have available for you there. Like I said, it is open source, and so people regularly and frequently will update the community message boards about it. They'll regularly write new exploits and things like this. It's very, very well put together for a public open source product. But it's also kind of now part of something called Rapid7. This is a company that we looked at earlier. They have that Nexpose product. You can get now the Metasploit community, Metasploit Express and Metasploit Pro. Community is free, and what this will do is give you all the basic functions of Metasploit in a UI, because on its own, in its core level, Metasploit really is a completely command line tool. And if you want to rather use a UI, then you would want to get one of these products. Now, the free one, of course, is just that, free, but it gives you only the basic functionality of it. You can get an increasing level of capabilities if you pay more for Metasploit Express, which is like, small, medium, and large, apparently. Here, this medium soft drink from McDonald's apparently costs $3,000. Wow! Sounds really expensive, but you also have to balance that out against the cost of being exploited. You see, in this case, these are generally used for penetration testers or internal employees that are doing security audits, and you want to find out where the vulnerabilities are before someone steals all your money. Okay, so if you think of it that way, sure, yeah, $3,000 might be a bargain. Okay, and then there's the Metasploit Pro, which gives you a huge quantity of different things. I'm not going to do all the feature product bullet points for you, because that's up to these people to advertise, I guess. But look at how much the price is here. Contact us. It's kind of like when you go into a really expensive department store and they don't have any price tags on anything. It's one of those things, if you have to ask how much it is, you can't afford it. Well, apparently, I can't afford this. I know I sure can't afford this. In fact, I'm so cheap, I don't think I can even afford this version, the free version. That's how cheap I am, folks. But regardless, if you don't want to get any of these things, you don't want to mess with the UI and all of that. Oh, I lost their download section. But they do have a download section where you can also get just the framework itself and continue on with your Metasploit exploits. I'll be doing a simple demonstration of Metasploit here shortly, but just keep in mind that Metasploit is a tool that you can always have kind of in your tool belt, so to speak, and use it pretty much at any time throughout most of this whole series. So if you find a port that's open and you know that there's a weakness with the version of FTP they're using, I'll just grab Metasploit and start running it. It really kind of carries through many of the topics that we'll be discussing throughout this whole series, even if we don't use it in every single nugget. Now, I talked about the editions as well. You know, the Community Edition is still free. The Express version is $3,000, and you have to call for the Pro one. Again, it's a command line product primarily. That's the open source version of that is command line. The UI, you can get the free one, like I mentioned earlier, but you may also have to pay for it. Now, there's another alternative here from something called Armitage. Fortunately, Rapid7 has included Armitage in the open source framework download, and I'll show you that here as we go as well. That's actually got a UI on it, and it makes Metasploit much easier to work with, but it is completely free, so very, very nice to have. Alright, in this case I've downloaded and installed the Metasploit framework on my Ubuntu machine. Now, for the interface that we work with, there's a couple of different ways we can go from the command line. One of those would be MSF-CLI. Actually, let me just open up a new terminal here and show you that. I've already got one open. Let me open another one. MSF-CLI. Okay, this is not the one that I'm going to be using the most often. What this is going to be useful for is for various kinds of scripting, and it allows you to run things directly from the command line and output to other command line tools. So it's got a great deal of flexibility, but you also have to have a higher level of expertise in making this one work. Okay, one thing that's probably more popular though would be the MSF console. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run that real quick here. And what that is, it's going to give us the interface that we need to do to perform most of the hacks that we're interested in. Then once we get it going, we have something like this. Now, a couple of things we want to do. Number one, remember you've already done your scanning. So you should already have a list of potentially vulnerable hosts within your network. And you should also, if you've done your footprinting right, you may know which operating system they're running and which patch version they're running, maybe when the last time it was that they are rebooted. So you have some idea of some of the exploits that you can run. Where do you get the various exploits? Well, there's just a myriad of resources out there on the internet as far as what's the most recent exploit and what the shell code would be for that and all. One of the places I like to go, I think I've got it here. Let me show you. Is the, where'd it go? Exploits database. I think I talked about that a little while ago. But for this, you can just look at the exploit database, and you can look for the shell code about it. For example, I can go to the shell code itself. This is what could be put into the MSF CLI, where you can just start doing some of this stuff. So whatever that thing is, I don't even know. I'll just click on it. So here's shell code that I could use, which would then, oops, I just opened QuickBooks Pro apparently. There was a little banner ad down at the bottom that I accidentally clicked on. Darn you, banner ads, for crying out loud. Anyway, I guess these exploit DB people have to pay for their way somehow. Anyway, so I just snip all of this code out, change anything that I might need to change for my own particular purposes, and then I can run an exploit against that shell code. Now, hacking via shell code is a much higher level of hacking than what we're looking at here, and probably higher than what we need to do, because you're going to see just how easy it is to exploit a machine using Metasploit. So, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to use a specific exploit that I've already found out that's my destination computer is vulnerable against, and that'll be my Windows Server 2003 computer. This is a common vulnerability that a lot of machines are vulnerable against, and it's pretty darn dangerous. To do it, I would do a use, and then I would specify which exploit I wanted. I want a Windows exploit, and it's DCERPC MS03. Let me explain what 03 here is. I can't talk and type at the same time, so let me just do it that way. 3_026_DCOM. Okay, this might look familiar. If you look at Microsoft security bulletins, they're named in this fashion, and this is specifically going to exploit a known weakness with Microsoft operating systems. So I'm going to go ahead and use that exploit. All right. Notice that it changes the command prompt so that anything I type in from this point forward is going to be relative to that particular exploit. And if you need to know what to type next, just do a type show options. Different exploits have different features or different requirements that you need to do. And what we have here is we need to identify the remote host and the remote port. Okay, these are the requirements. All right. And it works against all of these hosts right here. Okay. All right. So Having gotten all that done, let me do a set R host, because remember, this at a minimum I have to set these things. So set, these aren't really case sensitive, which is unusual for Linux, but I'm going to go ahead and make them all case sensitive anyway. R host, and then the destination, which is 10.10.10.90. Okay, that's the host I'm going to attack. Then I'm going to set localhost, which is myself, 10. I think I'm at 80. No, I'm at 70. There we go. Okay, so I've got that going. Now what I need to do is to set the payload. Well, this means that, yeah, I want to run whatever this exploit is right here, but when it runs against this destination, well, then what? Does it blow up? Does smoke start pouring out of the top of it? Does it shut off all the cooling fans inside? You know, what happens with this thing? Well, what we want to happen is we need to load the payload. All right, so the payload is going to be set payload generic. This is a common payload. Shell underscore reverse underscore TCP. Now, let me explain a little bit about this. Very often when you exploit a remote system, you want it to open up a shell, so like a command prompt. And from that command prompt, I can do a lot of different things, which I'll show you here. But when we set the payload, we just want to run a reverse shell. Reverse meaning that it's going to point back to me so that I can interact with it on this Ubuntu machine. You're going to see this when it comes to light here. I'm just going to go ahead and press enter. You guys ready to exploit? Let's have some fun and destroy a target machine or something, okay? We'll just get into it. The next command is I'm going to exploit this payload using this security weakness against this remote host from this local host. You got it? So I'll press exploit, and ta-da! Does that look familiar? What is my current operating system? Ubuntu. Okay, what does this look like? A Windows command prompt. I'm actually at a Windows command prompt on a remote machine, and I have system level privileges, so I can do pretty much anything I want to. I can create user accounts. I can do command line editing of the registry. Lots of different things. I don't have a UI with this, but you could do most things now through a command line in Windows, and especially with more current versions of Windows and the increasing reliance on PowerShell, I could send PowerShell scripts over here. So, pretty cool tool. In fact, I'm so happy. If I had a tail right now, I'd be wagging it. Ooh, wait a minute. Hold on. What in the world is that? Oh, gee, I should probably have that checked out. All right, hopefully that can be removed. Anyway, so what we can do now is we can do things like add user accounts. Let's take and just go, how about net user? This is a domain controller I've hacked, by the way. Add. And let's add in, I don't know, some innocent-sounding user like Penrod. Okay, so Penrod is now a user over there. Well, what kind of privileges does Penrod have? Probably just domain user. There's no special privileges when you add a user account using this method. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if I could add him to the domain admin security group? How about net group domain admins? What's his name again? Penrod. Add. Ta-da! Now he's a member of the Domain Admin Security Group. And you can also add him to things like the Remote VPN Users Security Group or Remote Desktop Users Security Group, things like that, so that in the future, if you wanted to, you could kind of leave this as an open back door so that you could come back with the UI later on and create a remote desktop session. It's very handy in all the crazy things you can do with this. Alright, so just to prove that it worked, by the way, let me, over on the other screen, I've opened up a remote desktop session to that very computer that we are hacking right now. Okay, if I go into the domain and then go down to the users, you can see that I created Penrod down here. And Penrod is a member of, oh yes, domain admins. I might as well add him to schema admins, enterprise admins, anything else I want to, because I pretty much have, again, full control over that system right now. Okay, what else can I do with this? Well, I could transfer files over to this machine. What could I transfer? Anything I want. I could transfer rootkits, which we'll talk about, I think, coming up in a couple of nuggets here in the future. I could transfer over some kind of a Trojan, another kind of a backdoor. I could transfer a virus, spyware, keyloggers, whatever I want. So I'm going to do a TFTP. Maybe I want to find out the passwords of the existing users over on this computer. So I'll do a TFTP-I, and then what I'm going to do is establish a TFTP connection back to .70. What is .70? That's this Ubuntu computer that we're looking at right now. All right. The remote computer that I'm exploiting is .90. That's my domain controller. That I've got this Windows command prompt app. So I'm telling the .90 computer here, this Microsoft computer, to connect to the computer we're looking at over TFTP to .70. Okay. And then I'm telling it that I want it to get a file. How about the latest version of pwdump7.exe? And I want to send that to // how about a temp directory? Hopefully I created that temp directory. I can't remember if I did or not. We'll find out soon enough. Dump7.exe. Okay? So I'm going to do that. Apparently I did. All right. So I've created that over there now. The next thing I would need to do is I actually need to get another file. Unfortunately, you can't use the up and down arrow keys to repeat commands. It just gives you that thing. So I have to type this all over again to get the next file because you need to get the library file as well. So TFTP. And we saw this earlier when we ran... what did we run? We ran pwdump earlier in a previous nugget. So 10.10.10.70 get, and then I want to run libba, I don't know why they spell it that way, .dll, and then again to /temp libea32.dll. Okay, and so now we've got that file as well. And the next thing I want to do is to go ahead and run pwdump. So let me change directories to the temp directory. And we can see that both of those files now are successfully there. So let me type pwdump7, and I'm going to go ahead and send that out to passwords.txt. Okay, and we see that it has extracted that now out to the passwords file. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to put that file. So I'll TFTP, and then I do a -i. 10.10.10.70, because again I'm connecting back to my Ubuntu machine, and instead of getting this time, which is how you download files, now I'm going to put the file, I'm going to upload the file to myself, and it's going to be the passwords.txt file. Alright, so now I've got that file on my Ubuntu machine, and then of course I could do whatever I want to with it. Since it's going to have all of the hashes, I could run John against it and stuff like that. In fact, let me just show you just to prove that it's got the hashes in there. Type passwords.txt. You know, there's the administrator and so on. And again, remember that it's a domain controller, so all of the other accounts that have been created are created in Active Directory. So that's why we do get the basic administrator account here, and that's always useful. Now then, to also prove that I am indeed the administrator account, I went ahead and ran the system account. I ran whoami/all, and look who I am. Yes, the almighty system. This account has a higher level of privilege than any admin account that you can interactively log on with. It's higher level than domain admins, enterprise admins. It can even touch files that domain and enterprise admins are not allowed to touch. So it's a very high level of privilege that we have here. Alright, let's switch over here to Armitage. Now again, Armitage really is just a UI front end for Metasploit, and it gives you a great deal of flexibility in working with it. You just type Armitage from your command prompt, it'll just go ahead and launch it, and you can see I've got it in the back here, and there it is. Now what we need to do with this is we gotta put some hosts in here. So I'll right click here, actually I'll go here, go to hosts, and you can either import hosts from some previous item that you've got, an XML file or something like that, you know, a Burp Suite session, which is another hacking tool, and Nessus item. You know, so anything that you want to find here that you can do, or you can import and auto-detect a specific file, or you can just manually add in hosts one at a time. I'm going to enter in .90, which again is my same server that I just hacked a moment ago. One thing you want to keep in mind with this is even if you have only the one host to add in, don't press enter. That's just kind of a reflex that we do after we enter in a line. Don't press enter and then click add because it won't take. So make sure there's no carriage return or enter after that, and just click add now, and you'll see it pop up here as one imported file, but really it's just an imported machine, I guess. And there it is. Now, we really don't have much going on with this yet. Now, if we use Armitage, this is going to be kind of noisy. We can scan it. It's going to actually use, you know, an Nmap scan and several other things. I think there's 21 different things that it does to footprint this machine and so forth. There you go, 21 different discovery modules. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that it's kind of noisy. So you can't really use this if you're working on the sly, so to speak. And you can see it just changed the operating system. It determined what it was. So the operating system here that we've got, you know, we can go down here and we can specify it individually if it's one of these, and that'll help to narrow down the various kinds of hacks that we can run against it. Then if we decide we want to run an attack against it, what we would do is go to attacks, and then what we'll do is to click find attacks, and either by port or by vulnerability. And then once you do that, it'll give you an additional attack right-click on the host down here. So I've got to give it a moment to scan itself here. And then it did its attack analysis, okay? And so then we'll have a right-click here. Oh, I guess we don't have it yet. Let me do the other attack as well. Find attacks, and this one we'll do by port. See what that gives us. All right, there it is. Okay, so we click OK here. And then we'll have now have this attack item here. And again, it kind of depends. I mean, it's not as it is a Samba server. It depends on your perspective. If you're attacking it from a Linux machine, you can kind of use it as a Samba server because that's what's used in order to access Windows shares. All right. If it's a proxy server, you have some things you can work with there. If it's got SQL running, a few different exploits that we can run there. I know it's a HTTP server, but notice that it's not really an Apache server. So these probably wouldn't work. You still have to be a little bit, you have to discriminate a little bit on which ones of these you use. Just don't want to go and kind of run a Hail Mary out there. Although, this is kind of fun. Let me show you this. There's actually also a Hail Mary. So if you're desperate and you say, I don't know what's going to work, let's just run it, and just do a port or vulnerability or something. But this should look familiar to you. Yep, that's the same exact hack that I ran a little while ago. And if I run that one, then that will perform the same exploit. And then once you launch this, it should open up a Meterpreter command prompt down here, which gives you some additional functionality that you can work with. It's actually pretty cool. There's some different ways of working with that. Oh, I don't think I did it right. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is, Meterpreter. Okay. I was afraid for a moment that I didn't do this right. So then it gives you a lot of different things. You can do things such as get the system information from it. I'm not going to elaborate too much on this right now. You can get a screenshot of what's going on that computer right now. You can do things like capturing keystrokes. So it's very, very flexible and gives you quite a bit of capability. Anyway, on the Certified Ethical Hacker exam, I don't think you're going to be tested specifically on Armitage, but you do need to know about Metasploit. I'm just showing you Armitage here because, wow, it's a really good tool, and you should know it just for practical reasons. In this nugget, we took a look at system hacking. We started off taking a look at privilege escalation, which is what you just saw that I did with Metasploit. And in fact, that's what we discussed. I'll just check that now. We talked about Metasploit there, but what we saw happen was I escalated my privilege to the system level, even higher than any logged on administrator could possibly ever get. That's going to be very important in system hacking so that you can do high-level functions. Also, we looked at alternate data streams as a way of hiding data so that we can stuff one file inside of another and it goes undetected. We took a look at spyware, which is, of course, a great way to install some things on someone else's computer to see their secrets, see their passwords or whatever. One of the most nefarious forms of that is going to be a keylogger. We took a look at steganography, which is very similar to these alternate data streams in that it can bury data inside of an image file or some kind of an MP3 or something of this nature. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.